The most dangerous attacks don't come from enemies. They come from people who know exactly which emotional button to press. Carl Jung revealed a psychological trick that makes those buttons useless. Most people believe that when someone attacks them, the attack must say something important about who they are. This belief is what gives criticism its power. The truth Carl Jung uncovered is far more unsettling and far more liberating. In most cases, an attack is not a clear-eyed assessment of you. It is an emotional spillover from the other person's inner world. People rarely strike from clarity. They strike from discomfort, frustration, envy, fear, or shame they haven't learned how to face. In American culture, where success is visible, competition is constant, and comparison is unavoidable, projection is everywhere. Someone watches you speak confidently, pursue your goals, or refuse to shrink, and something inside them tightens. That tightening is not about you. It's about what your presence forces them to feel about themselves. Instead of processing that discomfort internally, they externalize it. They criticize, mock, label, or attack. In that moment, you become the screen onto which they project what they cannot tolerate within. Projection works because it feels convincing. The attacker sounds certain. They may even use moral language, concern, humor, or just being honest as a disguise. But certainty does not equal truth. Jung understood that the human psyche will protect itself at all costs. When a person is unable or unwilling to confront their own insecurity, anger, or sense of failure, the mind looks for relief. Attacking someone else provides that relief, at least temporarily. This is why criticism so often feels disproportionate. The reaction doesn't match the situation. A small behavior triggers a massive emotional response. A harmless comment becomes a personal offense. Your ambition is labeled arrogance. Your boundaries are called selfishness. Your confidence is interpreted as ego. These distortions are clues. They signal that something deeper is being touched in the other person, something unresolved. Once you understand this, the emotional sting changes. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Why is this provoking such a strong reaction?" That shift alone restores power. You are no longer automatically placing yourself on trial. You are observing the interaction with psychological distance. And distance is what breaks the spell of projection. Many people in the US are conditioned to personalize everything. Performance reviews feel like judgments of worth. Online comments feel like attacks on identity. Family criticism feels like proof of inadequacy. This conditioning makes projection incredibly effective. The moment you internalize an attack, you finish the work for the attacker. You carry their unresolved emotions for them. Jung's insight invites you to refuse that role. Refusing projection doesn't mean pretending criticism never matters. It means evaluating it rather than absorbing it. You learn to separate information from emotional charge. If someone offers calm, specific, constructive feedback, that's different. But when criticism comes loaded with anger, contempt, or exaggeration, it's no longer about improvement. It's about discharge. Think of how often people attack qualities they secretly admire but feel unable to embody. They ridicule discipline while feeling ashamed of their lack of it. They criticize risk taking while feeling trapped by their own fear. They mock creativity while living safely inside routine. Your existence becomes a reminder of what they didn't choose, didn't risk, or didn't become. Attacking you temporarily relieves that pain. Understanding this doesn't make you superior, it makes you free. You stop needing universal approval. You stop chasing validation from people who are fighting themselves. You realize that being attacked is not evidence of failure. Often it's evidence of impact. You touch something real. This perspective is especially powerful in a society obsessed with public opinion. Social media magnifies projection at scale. Strangers comment on lives they don't understand, projecting their politics, frustrations, moral anxieties, and unmet needs onto people they'll never meet. If you internalize every voice, you fracture. If you understand projection, you remain intact. The emotional relief that comes from this awareness is immediate. Your nervous system no longer treats every attack as a threat. You feel grounded. You respond instead of react. And that composure often unsettles attackers more than any comeback ever could. When their words fail to wound you, they are forced, however briefly, to sit with themselves. Another important layer of this insight is recognizing why certain attacks hurt more than others. Not all criticism lands. Some rolls right off. The attacks that sting are the ones that hook into existing self-doubt. This doesn't invalidate the idea of projection. It deepens it. The attacker may be projecting, but your reaction reveals where you haven't fully stabilized your own self-concept yet. That awareness becomes useful, not shameful. Instead of collapsing into self-blame, you gain information about where growth is still happening. The key difference is agency. You are choosing to examine yourself rather than being emotionally hijacked. You are no longer at the mercy of other people's unresolved issues. Over time, this changes how you move through the world. You stop over explaining. You stop defending your intentions to people committed to misunderstanding you. You conserve energy. You invest it where it matters: your work, your values, your relationships with emotionally responsible people. In American life, where assertiveness is rewarded, but emotional literacy is rare, this skill becomes a quiet advantage. You remain steady in meetings where others posture. You stay composed in conflict while others escalate. You don't need to dominate the room to feel secure. That calm authority is often mistaken for confidence, but it's actually something deeper: self-possession. Jung's idea of projection dismantles the illusion that everyone's opinion deserves equal weight. It teaches discernment. Some opinions are reflections, not evaluations. Some attacks are confessions in disguise. Once you see that, you stop bleeding energy into battles that were never really about you. The most profound shift happens internally. You no longer experience attacks as proof that something is wrong with you. You experience them as psychological data points about the other person's inner state. That reframing doesn't harden you. It softens you without weakening you. You can feel empathy without surrendering yourself, respect. And in a culture that often equates loudness with truth and outrage with strength, this quiet clarity becomes radical. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to correct every accusation. You don't need to prove your worth to people who are projecting their pain. Understanding projection doesn't make attacks disappear, but it removes their power to define you. And when that power is gone, you move through criticism with steadiness, not fear, anchored in the knowledge that most attacks are not personal truths, but reflections of battles you were never meant to fight. In a culture that celebrates quick comebacks, viral clapbacks, and instant defense, refusing to react is often misunderstood as weakness. In reality, it is one of the strongest psychological positions a person can take. Carl Jung understood that reaction is rarely a conscious choice. It is an automatic discharge of emotion, triggered when the ego feels threatened. When someone attacks you and you react instantly, you may feel justified, but you have already surrendered control. Most people don't realize how much power they hand over in that moment. The attacker sets the emotional agenda, and you follow it. Your tone changes, your body tightens, your thoughts race. Whether you lash out over explain, or retreat defensively, your nervous system is now working for them. Jung saw this clearly. Whoever controls your emotions controls you. Refusing to react breaks that dynamic entirely. Non-reaction is not suppression. It's not pretending you don't feel anything. It's the ability to feel an emotional surge without obeying it. That distinction is critical. Suppression stores tension in the body and leaks out later. Conscious non-reaction observes the emotion, allows it to pass, and chooses a response or no response from clarity. In American life, this skill is rare and therefore powerful. From workplace conflicts to political arguments to online discourse, people are trained to respond immediately. Speed is mistaken for strength. Volume is mistaken for confidence. But speed usually belongs to impulse, not wisdom. The loudest person in the room is often the least regulated. Jung believed that maturity begins when a person stops identifying with every internal impulse. Just because you feel offended doesn't mean you must act offended. Just because someone provokes you doesn't mean they deserve access to your emotional energy. When you refuse to react, you create a psychological pause, and in that pause, power returns to you. This pause changes how others experience you. Attackers expect resistance. They expect justification, anger, or collapse. When none comes, they feel destabilized. Their strategy no longer works. Many attacks are designed to provoke a reaction so the attacker can feel powerful, righteous, or superior. When you don't react, you deny them that reward. This is especially true in environments driven by competition and status. In meetings, debates, or social hierarchies, emotional reactions are often used to test dominance. If someone can knock you off balance, they gain leverage. When you remain calm, attentive, and measured, the balance shifts. You signal that your sense of self is not easily disturbed. Refusing to react also protects your identity. Emotional reactions tend to lock you into roles you didn't choose. You become the defensive one, the angry one, or the insecure one. Over time, these reactions shape how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Non-reaction keeps your identity fluid and self-directed. Many Americans are taught that self-respect means standing up for yourself immediately. But Jung would argue that true self-respect means not allowing others to dictate your inner state. You don't need to prove your worth in every confrontation. You prove it by staying grounded in your values, regardless of provocation. There's also a biological layer to this. When attacked, the body enters fight or flight mode. Blood rushes away from higher reasoning centers towards survival responses. That's why reactive responses often feel regrettable later. You didn't choose them. You were driven by adrenaline. Non-reaction interrupts this cycle. It keeps your physiology regulated, allowing intelligence to remain online. Over time, this practice builds emotional authority. You trust yourself more because you're no longer hijacked by every trigger. You don't fear conflict as much because you know you won't lose yourself inside it. This creates a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. Refusing to react also sharpens discernment. When you're not emotionally flooded, you can see what's actually happening. You notice tone. You notice patterns. You recognize when a conversation is productive and when it's performative. You stop wasting energy on people who are committed to misunderstanding you. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. Sometimes a response is necessary. The difference is timing and intention. A response chosen from calm carries weight. A response driven by reaction carries volatility. One earns respect. The other escalates conflict. In American society, where outrage often substitutes for dialogue, the person who remains composed stands out immediately. Calm becomes intimidating, not because it's cold, but because it's uncontrollable. You can't manipulate someone who won't react on command. Jung's insight reveals something uncomfortable. Many conflicts persist, not because issues are unsolvable, but because people are addicted to reaction. Reaction gives a sense of aliveness, righteousness, and identity. Stepping out of that cycle feels unfamiliar at first, but it's also liberating. As you practice non reaction, you'll notice something else change. Your energy returns to you. You're less drained after interactions. You don't replay arguments endlessly in your mind. You sleep better. Your focus sharpens. Emotional discipline creates mental clarity. Eventually, others adjust. Some stop attacking because there's no payoff. Some escalate briefly, then retreat. A few may accuse you of being distant or unbothered. But what they're really responding to is your independence from their emotional control. Refusing to react is not passive, it's selective engagement. You decide what deserves your voice, your time, and your emotional investment. In a world constantly trying to provoke you, that selectivity becomes strength. Jung didn't teach people to harden themselves against the world. He taught them to stop bleeding energy unnecessarily. When you no longer react automatically, you stop living defensively. You begin living deliberately. And that is why refusing to react is not weakness. It is mastery. When an attack happens, the mind instinctively collapses everything into one emotional experience. Tone, intention, truth, and judgment all blur together. That's why criticism can feel overwhelming even when it's vague or unfair. Carl Jung recognized that psychological strength begins with separation, the ability to distinguish what is actually being said from how it is being delivered. Emotional distance is what allows that separation to happen. Without emotional distance, you don't hear information, you feel accusation. Your nervous system interprets the moment as a threat, not a message. Once that happens, clarity disappears. You're no longer evaluating truth, you're defending identity. Jung understood that the ego's primary fear is being diminished, and emotional reactivity is its shield. But shields also block vision. Creating emotional distance doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It means stepping back internally just enough to observe instead of absorb. You are present, but not entangled. This internal posture allows you to listen without collapsing, to consider without submitting. In a society where people often equate intensity with honesty, this skill becomes essential. In the US, criticism is frequently wrapped in emotion, urgency, outrage, moral superiority, or sarcasm. When emotion is high, people assume truth must be present. But intensity is not evidence. Emotional distance breaks that illusion. It allows you to ask a simple but powerful question. Is this person offering information, or are they unloading emotion? Once you ask that question, the dynamic shifts. If the message contains something specific, grounded, and relevant, you can extract it without swallowing the hostility attached to it. If it's vague, exaggerated, or personal, you recognize it as emotional noise. Either way, you remain in control of your response. Jung believed that consciousness expands when we stop identifying with every internal reaction. The moment you feel attacked, your emotions speak loudly. Emotional distance lowers their volume so reason can be heard. This doesn't suppress feeling, it contextualizes it. You acknowledge what you feel without letting it dictate what you do. This distinction is crucial in environments like workplaces, families, and online spaces where criticism often lacks nuance. Many Americans grow up equating criticism with rejection. As a result, feedback triggers old wounds rather than present evaluation. Emotional distance separates past from present. You stop reacting to old stories and start responding to the moment in front of you. Another benefit of emotional distance is that it reveals intention. When you're calm, You can sense whether someone wants resolution or dominance. You notice patterns: who criticizes constructively and who attacks repeatedly without offering solutions. Over time, this awareness helps you decide where to invest your energy and where to disengage. Emotional distance also protects self-worth. When you fuse your identity with every opinion directed at you, your sense of self becomes fragile. It rises and falls with external approval. Jung warned against this dependency. A stable psyche requires an inner reference point, a sense of self that doesn't dissolve under pressure. With emotional distance, criticism becomes data, not definition. You can accept, reject, or modify it without feeling diminished. This is especially important in a culture that often frames disagreement as a moral failing. Emotional distance allows you to disagree without feeling attacked, and to be criticized without feeling erased. There's a practical shift that happens when you cultivate this distance. Your language changes. You stop using absolutes like always and never. You stop defending your character and start addressing specifics. You're no longer arguing to survive, you're communicating to clarify. People notice this shift. Conversations become shorter, cleaner, and less charged. Some individuals will feel disarmed by your calm, others may feel exposed. Emotional distance removes the emotional fog that many people rely on to maintain control. Jung also understood that emotional distance makes room for humility. When you're not flooded by emotion, you can admit mistakes without shame. You can say, that part is fair, without feeling defeated. Paradoxically, this openness often earns more respect than rigid defensiveness ever could. In American culture, where confidence is often performed rather than embodied, emotional distance creates authenticity. You don't need to dominate or disappear. You can stand your ground quietly. You can be firm without being aggressive. You can be receptive without being submissive. Over time, this practice reshapes your inner life. You stop rehearsing arguments long after they're over. You sleep better. You carry less resentment. Mental space opens up for creativity, focus, and connection. Emotional distance is not withdrawal from life, it's liberation from unnecessary conflict. Jung's insight here is subtle, but profound. Clarity is not achieved by overpowering emotion, but by creating space around it. In that space, truth becomes visible, and when you can see clearly, attacks lose their ability to confuse or control you. This is how emotional distance transforms criticism from a threat into something manageable, understandable, and ultimately powerless to define you. One of Carl Jung's most challenging ideas is the concept of the shadow, the parts of yourself you've pushed away, denied, or judged as unacceptable. These traits don't disappear, they go underground, and from there they influence how deeply criticism affects you. Jung understood that attacks only truly wound when they touch something inside you that has not yet been acknowledged. This is why some insults slide off effortlessly while others linger for days. The difference is not the attacker's words, but your relationship with yourself. When a criticism hits a hidden insecurity, it feels explosive. When it touches something you've already accepted, it has no leverage. Integration is what removes that leverage. In American culture, people are often encouraged to project confidence while suppressing vulnerability. You're taught to highlight strengths and conceal flaws. Over time, this creates an internal split. Parts of you are acceptable, parts are buried. The buried parts don't disappear, they become sensitive. And sensitivity is what attackers unknowingly exploit. Jung didn't believe psychological strength came from denying flaws. He believed it came from making them conscious. When you admit to yourself that you can be impatient, controlling, insecure, intense, or afraid, those traits lose their power over you. They are no longer secrets. And what is no longer secret cannot be used to shame you. This doesn't mean indulging in self criticism or lowering your standards. Integration is not self attack, it is honest ownership. You acknowledge what's there without dramatizing it or excusing harmful behavior. That honesty creates internal alignment. You stop fighting yourself. Once this happens, external attacks change their effect. When someone calls you controlling and you already know where you overmanage, there's no collapse. You can evaluate calmly. If there's truth, you adjust. If there's exaggeration, you dismiss it. Either way, your self-worth remains intact. This is why integrated people are so difficult to manipulate. Guilt doesn't hook them easily. Shame doesn't stick. Labels bounce off. They don't need to defend an image because they're not hiding anything essential from themselves. Jung also noted that unintegrated traits tend to be projected onto others. When you refuse to acknowledge your own anger, you see it everywhere else. When you deny your ambition, you judge it harshly in others. Integration reverses this process. As you accept your full range, you become less reactive to it in the world. In practical terms, this means that the more you know yourself, the less control others have over you. Attacks lose their emotional charge because they're no longer revealing something you're afraid to see. They become redundant. This is especially powerful in environments driven by status and comparison. In workplaces, social groups, and online spaces, people often use subtle shaming to gain advantage. Integrated individuals are immune to these tactics because they don't rely on external validation to maintain internal balance. Another overlooked benefit of shadow integration is compassion. When you stop condemning your own imperfections, you stop needing to condemn them in others. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You can set boundaries without hatred. You can disengage without bitterness. In the US, where public image is often treated as identity, integrating the shadow feels radical. It means valuing psychological wholeness over performance. It means choosing self-respect over perfection. That choice quietly dismantles the power of shame-based attacks. People often fear that acknowledging flaws will make them weak. Jung argued the opposite. What weakens you is denial. Denial fractures the psyche and creates blind spots. Integration strengthens because it unifies. You become internally coherent. As this coherence grows, something subtle but profound happens. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop needing to be seen as good, smart, or superior. You become less defensive because there's less at stake. You already know who you are. When someone attacks an integrated person, they often sense something unusual. The expected reaction doesn't come. There's no scramble to protect ego, no collapse into shame, just calm evaluation. That calm is not indifference, it's self-knowledge. Jung believed that the goal of psychological development was wholeness, not flawlessness. Wholeness includes contradictions, limits, and complexity. When you accept that, attacks lose their grip because they're no longer threatening an illusion. Shame only works on what is hidden. Once nothing essential is hidden from yourself, shame has nowhere to land. And when shame disappears, attacks lose their sharpest weapon. This is why integrating your shadow doesn't just heal you, it makes you untouchable. Many people spend their lives trying to become untouchable by eliminating flaws, perfecting their image, or controlling how others perceive them. Carl Jung believed this was a losing battle. The more you chase perfection, the more fragile you become. Perfection creates an image that must be defended. Wholeness creates a foundation that doesn't need protection. In American culture, perfection is often marketed as success. You're encouraged to optimize, brand, polish, and outperform. Mistakes are hidden. Doubt is masked. Vulnerability is managed. This constant pressure to appear flawless produces anxiety and defensiveness. When someone attacks, it feels like exposure. The reaction is panic, not clarity. Jung offered a radically different idea: strength comes from integration, not elimination. A whole person is not someone without weaknesses, but someone who knows them and has made peace with them. When you stop pretending to be more than human, criticism loses its power to destabilize you. Perfection depends on external validation. You need applause to confirm the image. Wholeness depends on internal alignment. You know who you are, so feedback becomes optional rather than essential. This internal shift is what makes attacks lose their emotional charge. When you're striving for perfection, every criticism feels like a threat to survival. When you're grounded in wholeness, criticism becomes just one perspective among many. You can listen without collapsing. You can disagree without hostility. You can walk away without resentment. Wholeness also changes how you relate to failure. Instead of seeing it as proof of inadequacy, you see it as part of growth. Jung believed that the psyche matures through tension, contradiction, and experience, not through avoiding mistakes. This mindset makes you resilient. Attacks often lose their sting because they're no longer confirming a feared narrative about yourself. Another key difference between perfection and wholeness is flexibility. Perfection is rigid. It demands consistency at all costs. Wholeness is adaptive. It allows evolution. When someone attacks a rigid identity, it shatters. When someone challenges a flexible one, it adjusts. This is why whole people rarely engage in image battles. They don't need to control how they're seen by everyone. They understand that perception varies, and that's not a threat. In a society obsessed with reputation, this is a quiet form of freedom. Wholeness also reduces the need for approval. You still value connection, but you're no longer dependent on it for self-worth. This independence makes you less reactive and more discerning. You choose relationships based on mutual respect, not validation. Jung believed that psychological health involved holding opposites: strength and vulnerability, confidence and doubt, ambition and rest. When you can hold these tensions internally, you're no longer destabilized by them externally. Attacks lose leverage because they're no longer revealing contradictions you're trying to hide. In American workplaces and social spaces, people often use labels to simplify and control others. Wholeness resists this simplification. You can't be easily boxed when you're comfortable with complexity. Labels slide off because they never capture the whole picture anyway. Over time, living from wholeness changes your presence. You become calmer under pressure, less defensive in disagreement, more authentic in expression. People may not always agree with you, but they sense your stability. That stability commands respect without demanding it. Perfection seeks dominance. Wholeness creates influence. One tries to overpower criticism, the other makes it irrelevant. This distinction is subtle but profound. Jung didn't promise a life without conflict. He promised a life where conflict no longer owns you. When you stop trying to be perfect and start becoming whole, attacks lose their ability to define you. And that is why wholeness, not perfection, is what ultimately makes you untouchable.